My review of Memoir 44 Eastern Front expansion. This is an expansion pack to the core Memoir 44 game. So first up, let's have a look at the rulebook. The rulebook, if you're not familiar with the expansion packs for Memoir 44, this follows the regular format. So basically what you have is an explanation of all the new components. In this expansion, you get some new terrain tiles, trenches which give a sort of a cover bonus. You get some new villages and forests. These work pretty much the same, well, exactly the same as the core game. And then it goes through to any new specific rules. Now the rules in this expansion, the new ones, the most important probably is the political commissar. And the way that works is that you're, as that player, you will place a card under the commissar, and the next turn you use that card that you placed the previous turn. It adds quite an interesting gameplay dynamic to the game. I thought that was good. You also there's some rules on the blitz rules. The key thing there is the Axis player may play a Recon 1 as an air power tactic card, and armor, the movement changes. So the Axis player is getting 3 hexes, and the Allied, the Soviet player, will be getting 2 hexes. You get some new medals, rules for minefields. There are some rules for camouflage. Some new badges. So sniper is which is just indicated by 1 infantry figure. Rolls 1 dice but has quite a long range. Combat engineers, the Finnish ski troops, as well as cavalry as well. And the scenarios feature these new rules that you'll be, and they're all well explained, well written, and added another layer of historical based depth to your games of Memoir 44. They're all quite straightforward, not complex, which is great. And then basically the rest of the book then is the scenarios. What I would say with the scenarios, as you can see here, because of the setting of the Eastern Front, for this game expansion, a lot of the scenarios are based on in the snow, and you want to be using the sort of snow-covered board for it to aesthetically look in keeping. As you can see from this example here, you don't get quite enough, I'll call them snow-esque tiles, so you're going to have to use some of the core tiles from the core game. Now, if you have the winter expansion, so the Ardennes expansion as well, between this expansion and that one, you would have enough tiles to make the board look aesthetically in keeping for its entirety for the different terrain tiles. If you don't, it's no problem. None of this affects the gameplay. It's just purely aesthetics. So you get a good number of tiles. Now we'll have a look at some of those in a second, but you don't get quite enough to do all the tiles for the game. So you're going to need to use some of the tiles from the core game. I've played through every single one of these scenarios, some of them multiple times, and they're all, the normal Memoir 44 type gameplay experience. I found them well balanced, found them engaging. They're very, some more than others, quite asymmetrical, and they all play brilliantly well. So here's another example. Look, so in this example, you can see the green tiles. They're from the core game. The white tiles are snow-esque, winter-themed tiles. They're from, you get those with this expansion, but you will need to use these tiles from the core game. Like I said, if you have the winter expansion, which is a separate expansion, you'll be able to use those and have it all thematically consistent. And you get, as you would expect, quite a few different missions. This was the mission that I played, the most recent. This is the one I've got set up on the table. We'll have a look at that in a second. But as you can see, you get plenty. This one's an interesting one. This scenario, this is set in Stalingrad, and it's one of the more asymmetrical missions because the Axis player has a lot of panzer infantry and artillery. And the Soviet player's got quite a few. It's got a couple of snipers, for example. So that's when you're going to use those new sniper rules, and so forth. And each mission generally has. So here's so I should say generally has an inclusion of one or more of those new rules that this expansion covers. Here's an example of a mission set in Kursk. So for this mission, you don't need the winter board, and you're just going to reuse the tiles, terrain tiles from the core game itself. This is one of the Kursk missions. So it's got, as you'd expect, quite a few tanks, a whole bunch of infantry as well. And like I said, these are all great, and you get plenty of them. You also get a couple of Overlord missions as well. So if you want to get the most from this expansion in its entirety, you will need to have the requirements that you need to do the Overlord missions, right? But it's great to include those for those gamers out there who enjoy playing the Overlord missions and have got that amount of content. And then finally a Barbarossa mission. So you get a good number of missions over the course of the Eastern Front. Like I said, I played them all. They all play great as you'd expect from the actual main game of Memoir 44. And like I said, a nice, tidy, well written, no problems with any of the rules. So let's have a look at the components. So here I've got one of the missions set up. It's the scenario that we just played, and you can see we've got the winter board, which is a separate piece of content that you will need. The actual board itself. All the winter tiles that you can see here are from this expansion. The green tiles are from the core Memoir 44 game set. You get 3 types of new figure minis. You get the Soviet infantry, Soviet tanks, the T-34 tanks, and the Soviet anti-tank stroke artillery pieces. What else? What I would say about the new figures that you get, the T-34s, the tanks, look great. They look like little T-34s, and they're in keeping and scale with the German Panzer IV tanks. I'm not a big fan on the infantry. I'll be honest with you. There's nothing wrong with them. They serve their purpose, but I find the pose unnatural. It's odd pose for an infantryman to be holding such a weapon like that. It's a petty thing, but I'm not a big fan. They're nicely, they're as well made as all the other figures in the Memoir 44 range. I'm just not a big fan of that particular sculpt on that pose. You can see the visual difference between them clearly between the Soviet forces and the Axis forces as well. What I would say from the mechanics point of view, the gameplay is fundamentally the same as Memoir 44. There are a couple of small additions, like I said, using the Commissar rules, which are quite interesting. You don't get any new cards with this expansion, so you're going to be using the same core card deck from the core game. What I liked about this expansion was more the thematic. The Eastern Front was a major component of World War II, and it's interesting and it's fun. It's a fun game, Memoir 44. It's an interesting theatre that adds an extra bit of historical depth to the game. The scenarios. This is actually the reason I've set this one up, because this is one of my favourite scenarios from the expansion. I know we've played this quite a few times now. It's a lot of fun. It's very asymmetrical. Again, partly because of the rules, but also because of the setup as well. And the last time we played this, the German forces were able to penetrate sort of the flanks and capture these key objectives here. So they got the extra medals for doing so. And the Soviets, there's some good tank battles between the two T-34s and the Panzer IV. So it was a lot of fun. So I hope that gives you a good overview of the extra components you get. Like I said, the tiles, The artwork's really nice. It's the same artwork in keeping with the winter expansion, which is a different expansion. The models and figures are all, they're nice. I particularly like the tanks. Not so fussed on the infantry, but it's a personal thing. So yeah, good stuff. So final thoughts for the expansion pack. I think that it's a great expansion for Memoir 44. This is a game that we play a huge amount of. It's one of my favourite introductory level war games. I think what this will give you is it gives you more missions. It gives you more missions that are maybe a little bit more asymmetrical than the core set because of some of the extra rules for the Soviet player that are interesting and thematic. I think the Eastern Front is arguably one of the most important components of World War II, and so therefore it's very thematically rich, and the game expansion does a great job of giving you a base level of that. I'm sure there are lots of other missions that are out there in the community sites for this expansion too. The components, the winter sort of themed terrain tiles look great. The minis look great. As I said earlier, I like the T-34s. The infantry I wasn't so keen on. It was just the pose. It's a personal thing maybe. I just found it looked a bit kind of awkward maybe than a natural pose. It doesn't affect the gameplay in any way, shape or form. The biggest thing I would say with this expansion is you will need the winter board. There is one mission that you can play that thematically looks in keeping, which is one of the Kursk missions, where you can just use the board from the core set. So it means that if you don't have the winter board, that when you buy this, and this is not a super expensive expansion as wargame expansions go, but when you buy this, you're going to have to factor in that extra board as well. And it's just to make it look in keeping. It doesn't affect the gameplay in any way, shape or form. It's purely aesthetic. If you have there's an additional winter expansion, sort of an Ardennes expansion. If you have that already, that with this will give you more tiles, so you can have those same missions but without needing to use the tiles from the core set, which again is just aesthetic and a little bit more pleasing to the eye when you're playing the game. I found all the missions a lot of fun. We've played them all several times, and a great addition to the sort of the missions from the core game, so that was great. There's nothing much else really to say. I think if you love Memoir 44 and you've just got the core game, this will give you a lot more game for the cost of the expansion, but you will need that winter themed board, in my opinion, just to get the most aesthetically. And to get everything out of this expansion, you'll also need enough game material to play the Overlord expansions, to play those larger missions as well. So just take that into account. Not that there's not enough in here without that. I'll be honest with you, there is. And if you're new to Memoir 44, you don't quite know what the game's about. It's a very straightforward introductory level war game that has a surprising amount of depth, I would say. And it's a game that you can comfortably set up and play and learn in an evening as well. And what this does is expand that out even more. And there's a whole bunch of different expansions. They come in and go in print, so it's not every single expansion is always in print. But this one's a good one, and like I said, the Eastern Front is a major component of World War II. I played this with my kids to sort of help teach them a little bit about the Eastern Front of World War II. And for that, it's a fun experience, right? It's a very engaging game. It makes you think a lot, makes you have those choices, and this does that, and it adds more on top because it has a few extra mechanics, more content, more missions, etc. So yeah, a thumbs up from me. If you have Memoir 44 and you're in the market for more expansions for it, this one's a good one. And so, yeah, highly recommended. Thanks for watching, as ever. Thank you.